everyone. Thank you for tuning in to From the Ground Up. My name is Megan Haupert, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Scott Galden. We've taken a few weeks off from recording, but we are back after the holidays. Super excited to talk with you guys and share some more information and insight with all things autism, faith, and family, and the journey that entails. So, Scott, how was your holiday?
It was wonderful. Got a chance to spend some time with family and got to watch a lot of football, which, my Dallas Cowboys are going to be playing in a playoff game this weekend. What are your Colts going to be doing this weekend, Megan?
They have already signed some one-year contracts, cut some guys. They're going to be negotiating with hopefully Michael Pittman. We need a receiver, and we need to sign him for sure. Figured out what we're going to do with Minshew because it's Minshew is no longer in Minneapolis. So.
Oh.
But yes,
so the season is over for the Colts.
Yes,
sorry to hear that.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
all right.
But
well, you'll have to jump on the Cowboy bandwagon.
Scott, I love you, but I'm not jumping on that bandwagon. I've always cheered about whoever plays the Cowboys. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
I know.
So you're a Niners fan now. Okay.
I am.
Well, okay. I can live with that. How was your holidays, by the way? With 3 young children, Christmas got to be a lot of fun around the Haupert house.
So much fun. We actually had Christmas at my house, or my husband and I's house. We just finished building our house in May, and my whole family came. My grandmother, my uncle, my brother, and my sister and her husband and their little girl had their first Christmas with her. She's a little miracle baby that was born in June. So it was just super fun to have everybody here, getting up to, get the kids excited about Christmas. My 7-year-old was determined that he was going to video Santa coming down the chimney. So he had 3 iPads set up in different parts of people's house. My iPhone, he was going to catch Santa, but actually Santa outsmarted him and found the cameras and shut them off before he could get any intricate details. So, but I appreciated his motivation. So it was a good holiday.
At 7 years old, that's a little scary. What's it going to be like at 14 and 15?
I know. Well, in my head, I'm like, when I was your age, that wasn't even a thing. Like,
yeah.
Come on now. But I appreciate his creativity. So
got a lot to look out for. So
yes.
Well, Megan, we talked a little bit about some different topics, and we're going to probably take the show in a little bit different direction tonight, because a lot of times we start out with some segments on autism, but you said, let's start this one out on faith.
Yes, I thought it would be a good switcheroo, but I think when we talk about our portion of family and some of the dynamics within extended family, the autism piece would come in a little bit better at the end of it. So we're going to just kind of pull a switcheroo tonight and just keep everybody on their toes for listening. We wanted to dive in a little bit with the faith piece. Scott, you wanted to talk a little bit about Luke 9:23?
Yeah. So I had it just for some clarification for anybody that's, maybe joining us for the first time or kind of new to the podcast. You have to know that I've spent a lot of time trying to understand the topic of suffering. I feel like we don't understand. In Western Christianity, we've really forgotten what suffering is all about. And when I go back and I look at the first century, they really understood what suffering was going to be, and they understand how it was going to fit into their faith. Where in today's society, it seems like all we're trying to do is get God to relieve us of suffering. We, just whatever it is that's causing us problems, God, take that problem off of my hands. And I don't think that's what the Bible calls for. I think the Bible basically says you're going to experience suffering, and there's going to be some suffering you don't deserve. And it's going to be part of what you have to learn to live with. And I think that the sooner that we can accept that as Christians, that our ability to maybe develop a close relationship with Christ and God is a little bit easier that way, quite frankly. And for a lot of people that are getting a diagnosis of autism, I know I went through a long, faith challenge as to what it all meant. And I spent a lot of time angry with God, because it was like, look, God, I didn't deserve this. Certainly my son didn't deserve this. And you're going to have to provide some answers to this. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. If you don't mind, I'm going to share a little bit of some thoughts I have about that. And I'm going to give a shout out to my pastor, Rick Atchley, because for reference, Megan, you know that I had listed this as something for us to discuss, but Rick added a lot to the Sunday morning sermon that I'll probably reference. So Rick, thank you for sharing these ideas. and in discipleship and how we're supposed to follow Christ. And it just fits right in with what I'm talking about today. So the passage says, "Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." One of the things that really stuck out in this passage as I read it, for, many times, I know as a child, I used to think of the cross as a more literal. I remember in junior high youth group and high school youth group, sometimes they would like build a cross. And this is what it's like to take up your cross every day. You've got to carry it around with you. And it was a very physical thing that we talked about, a very literal thing. And I think as I've grown up and really restudied this, I look at taking up your cross as an imagery of unjust suffering. That's what the cross represents. It doesn't represent two pieces of wood that are put together. It represents unjust suffering, because when you think about it, when Jesus was put on the cross, he was subject to unjust suffering in two very specific ways. First off, the state of Rome used crucifixion as a very specific form of punishment. And it was for treason. It was for uprising. If you did something that Rome thought you shouldn't do, you risked being crucified for it. Okay. And although Jesus was accused, he was never really proven to be, trying to overthrow the government of Rome. In fact, in front of Pontius Pilate, basically says, I really can't find what this person is guilty of, right? He really couldn't. The people demanded it. He said, well, okay, if that's what you're going to do, here you go. Okay. But from an earthly standpoint, Christ suffered unjust suffering. From a heavenly standpoint, Christ suffered unjustly. Because when you think about it, the cross represents taking on the sins of all of the people on a perfect sacrifice that didn't deserve any of what it received. So from a spiritual or a heavenly realm, Christ also had unjust suffering. So when I read this passage and I start to look at it and I plug in, you have to deny yourself and take up your unjust suffering and follow me. It helps me to better understand that I believe that Christ is making it clear, and he's giving us a call that you're going to have to take upon yourself some things that are unjust suffering and follow me. So go ahead.
I think not only is it taking up that cross, but it's how we take up that cross, right? He didn't stomp his feet and pout and say, no, I didn't do this. I didn't deserve that. He did it humbly and
Yes.
submissively. And I
Yes.
think that's part of that journey too, is how we handle picking up that cross, not just picking it up, but what's our mindset as we're doing it.
In a willing and an obedient manner.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, when Christ was praying in the garden, he prayed to God, let this cup pass before me. I don't want to suffer this. This is not where I want to be, but I pray that your will be done, with the idea that if this is to be, just give me the strength that I could do it in a manner that's pleasing to you. So when we're faced with this idea of unjust suffering in dealing with autism, we have to have that kind of attitude, I think, that says, I could pray that this passes. I don't want this to be, I'd much rather my child be cured. I'd much rather be, my child be whole. But if that's not the case, then I've got to try to do my best to make the most of this and to honor God with whatever the suffering is that I'm going to be going through with this, and do it in a manner that's pleasing to him. The second point I wanted to make is that Christ calls us to follow him in that. One of the points that Rick made in his sermon is, in current Western Christianity, a lot of times we use the phrase, accept Jesus. Have you come to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? We look at that as kind of the threshold move to call oneself a Christian, is acceptance of Jesus. Well, in reality, the Bible doesn't really speak of acceptance of Christ. Jesus never says, you just need to accept me. He says, you need to follow me. You need to become more like me. You need to exhibit the things that I do. So if we're going to be followers of Jesus as we take up our cross, we have to learn to do this in the same manner that Christ would have. That's what we're called to be. So, for all of us that are kind of sitting in this difficult, challenging, faith, trying place, we have to understand that we're in a position now that we can make choices that will bring honor to God and will put us in a position to be more like Jesus when we get to the end of this journey. And that's something we have to keep in mind.
And that acceptance piece, anybody can do that, right? But it's the actual change of behavior. It's people seeing the difference in us that makes us stick out. We're called to also bring other people to Christ.
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure in our decisions and our behavior that people see that in us. And, I for me personally, I think the biggest piece for me is I take heavy is yes, I'm a follower of Jesus, but what do people like when people see me, do they think that? Like, am
Yes.
I exhibiting that? And I think, as for parents of kiddos with autism, being that model for others that they can speak grace to you, they can speak love to you, but they can also speak the reality of it. Like, I know this is really hard and I know this is not fair and I know it just stinks,
Yes.
but what does that change look like? What does that look like to others? And like you said, that's the hard part. That's the hard part about following Jesus. Anybody can say, "Yeah, I'm going to follow him. That's great. I accept him. I appreciate this
Yeah.
free gift of grace. Yes, please sign me up." But when it comes to the whole transitional piece of my lifestyle, my choices, my behavior, how people see me and how I follow and submissive and very humbling in different aspects of my life, do people see that and do people see Jesus through that?
Well, and I can testify that I do believe that my life's changed significantly of being a dad of an autistic child. And I'm a much, yes, there was a time where had a lot of faith questions and was in a dark place, but also there's a way out of that. And then once you're a stronger person because of it. And people are going to see that and they're going to be attracted to it. And quite frankly, it's going to be maybe the greatest testimony you can give about Christ is how you, through following him through these very, very difficult times, he's made a difference in your life and you can see it and others can see it in you as well. That's a testimony that goes far beyond anything you can tell them about the gospel. That gospel will preach in a way that other words may not be able to. So, if I can encourage anybody out there that's going through this time right now, let me just encourage you to consider this an opportunity to follow Christ and understand that you're going to be experiencing unjust suffering. You have a Savior that did the same thing, and we're not promised that we're not going to experience unjust suffering in this world. That's just part of being here, and that's part of being a disciple of Christ. It's something we're going to have to learn to work with.
So we have spent some time talking with your beautiful wife, Julie, about her standpoint from a mom of a child with autism. You've shared your perspective, your journey. We've talked with Missy Kennedy of Care Cuts, who's also a mom of a child with autism. I think we kind of need to talk a little bit more about the extended family, about grandparents, about aunts, uncles, cousins, that sort of thing, because sometimes they kind of get lost in the mix, right? And I think just coming out of the holidays, this might be a good thing to kind of share and talk with people about of what does that look like? We have to consider their feelings too.
Well, and Megan, you and I talked a little bit about this, but there's a lot of family members just don't understand autism, and they don't mean to be hurtful in some of the things they say and do, but sometimes it can be, and it's just they just don't understand. And one of the things we talked about today was, how can we help those members of our family that don't understand autism to better understand it so that they can accept it. I've had just so many people tell me, I can hardly bring my child around my parents because my parents are thinking that we just need to discipline our child more. If we just disciplined our child more, they wouldn't have these behaviors. And we know that that's a horrible thing, that's exactly the wrong approach to this. But, I'm sure you've seen it as well with people so we put together kind of a list of some ideas of how people can deal with that. You know,
Absolutely. I think, extending those family members grace for sure and kind of helping them understand autism is not visible, right? The child's not in a wheelchair. There's not some sort of physical difference that is visible. There's not specific things that you can see that says, hey, I have autism, right? And so it's not visible. So therefore, people don't understand and think that it's maybe just a discipline issue, or they just don't listen, or they just don't do this, and you should parent them different. And I'm sorry, but people judge parenting whether your kid has a disability or not, right? Like that's just life. I'm a firm believer is you don't know what journey people are walking. You don't know what their history is. You don't know what their experiences are. So don't judge how they're raising their children. They're doing. I found that if I believe that people are doing the best they can with the circumstances they have and the resources they have, it kind of helps guide my thought process of being less judgy. But I think also, they don't, there's, if they've never had any exposure to kids with autism or other individuals with autism, their reference point is Rain Man or my coworker's son's daughter's uncle had autism. And so it's all through the grapevine and through perspectives that are very, very different and very, very skewed. I think there's also some different responses that extended family members have. Maybe they're angry, maybe there's some fear, some denial, confusion about the diagnosis. How did this happen? Where did it come from? What did I do? I think grandparents, there's some perspectives with, different generational approaches to parenting that play in just in general. I mean, my parents raised me well, but our parenting styles and my parenting style is different than theirs. Doesn't
Sure.
make either one right or wrong. It's a completely different world now.
Mhm.
You've got, a feeling of powerlessness, I wish I could change what was happening to my family. I think I kind of relate that a lot to grandfathers just because I think about my dad and how he very much, wants to always do what's right for my kids and help them and care for them and be able to be in control of things for them to keep them safe. And so when you have these feelings of powerlessness or disappointment, like, how am I going to have a relationship with my child? Just like as parents, when we're raising our kids and we find out that we're going to have a child or we're going to, adopt or whatever, we have these dreams of all these things we're going to do. Well, grandparents have that too. They start deciding what they're going to be called before the baby's
Yes.
even there, right? And so now they have found out that this child maybe is not able to communicate with them in a way that they're familiar with, or
Mhm.
is there guilt? Did I do this? Is this something I passed on to them? And this
But I think too, there's some embarrassment of their peers because you know what? Other grandparents can be kind of judgy too.
yeah,
They can be kind of like, oh, what, because they're always, bragging on their grandchild
yeah,
and, oh, well, what's wrong with your grandkid? Or, there's five people and they're all telling what all the great things their grandkids are doing. And they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs going, I don't have much to brag about. And they can start to feel like it reflects on them poorly, and they have a hard time with that.
well, and I think there's some different things as parents and even as extended families members they can do to kind of help combat that and give themselves some tools to really navigate these conversations. I think just understanding the diagnosis and what it is so important. When people understand that, some of the core deficits of autism are related to communication and social interaction, that right there should be a huge, like, okay, that makes sense. This is why my child has a really, or my grandson or my niece or my nephew has a really hard time when we're all together for the holidays because social situations are hard for them. Or, they have some sensory needs. This is overstimulating for them. This is really hard for them to process. And if they have that understanding of what the actual diagnosis is and how it specifically relates to that child or their relative, then it can kind of start to connect dots and help paint a more clear picture for them, you know?
One of the things that I think has helped me picture it, and I've used it to explain to others, is if you can picture that, the brain has all these different things that it does. And most kids' brain development is very consistent. It goes all the areas of the brain start to develop at about the same rate. But in an autistic kid, they can have certain brain developments, like motor planning and things like that at a certain range, but their communication development is just almost nothing. That part of their brain is just not working the way it's supposed to. Or the part of the brain that says, hey, I want to reach out and be social with somebody, that part of the brain's just not working. And if you can kind of paint that picture for them so they can go, okay, now I understand. Because if you put them in a functional MRI, these kids with autism, you can light it up and see what part of the brain's working and what part's not working. And you can go, okay, I can see where the problem is. But if you can kind of help paint that picture of there's just parts of their brain that doesn't work the way other kids' brains does, yet there's parts of it that still does. And it gets real confusing, and you can't discipline out a child whose brain isn't working the way it's supposed to work. You don't change their behavior that way because their brain's just not developed there yet.
Well, and not only that piece of the development of the brain, but how that brain learns. It learns
Yes.
differently. And
Yes.
having to navigate and having to be explicitly taught those skills, like this, we talk about this area of the social deficits. Young children, toddlers, they pick up on behaviors by observing and by modeling. And kids with autism don't always pick up skills that way. And so that's beyond anybody's control, right? Of how that child learns. And so that's why they often need those extra supports in the forms of occupational therapy, speech therapy, ABA therapy, play therapy, all kinds of different things to help figure out how does their brain learn and how can we best support them and help develop that brain in those different areas. So I think that's really important just to help family members really understand. And I think sometimes we see a lot of escape avoidance of conversations around kids with autism because people don't want to ask questions. They don't want to explain. Parents feel like they have to justify every decision they make for their child. And I think that really starts at a foundational point of the relationship between the family members, right? Not a separate of the child.
Yes.
And so working and building that relationship to be a safe one and share without judgment is critical. But once you can help a family member understand, hey, this is why Colby does this, and this is why, we go and eat Mexican on Wednesdays because Colby's brain needs structure and routine, and it helps him thrive and feel comfortable and less anxious. So we're going to have Mexican every Wednesday night. And that's it. It is what it is. You can accept that, and that's fine. You're welcome to join us anytime we go. You feel like you want Mexican on a Wednesday, just let us know. You're happy to join us. But that's what our family is doing. Right. And family members can choose to participate or they can choose not to. I mean, it's up to them.
I think the hardest thing in our lives was getting family members to understand that our life had to be lived differently, that we had to live with a certain structure in place so that Colby could thrive in that structure. Schedules had to be kept. Foods had to be the same. We would get, well, why don't you have him try this? We have. But he doesn't. This is what he's comfortable with eating, And if I was 80 years old and I said, I want to eat chicken nuggets every day, and I'm going to throw a fit if you don't let me eat chicken nuggets every day. If I was 80 years old, you wouldn't have a problem feeding me chicken nuggets every day. Well, he's 10 years old. He wants chicken nuggets every day. And you know what? It's not a bad thing. Yeah. A lot of kids eat a lot of other junk too. So, you just kind of have to have those kind of conversations and help them to understand that you have to live differently than maybe other people do. And they're welcome to join your life, but you can't change your life to fit what they want.
Well, and we're so accepting as a society when families have a new baby and they're in a routine and okay, it's 7:30, we got to get home, the baby's got to get to bed. We're accepting of those routines, people are supportive of that. Okay, no problem, glad you could come. We need to have that same perspective with our kids that have disabilities as well and different needs for their learning and their routines. But I think also from a parent and I speak from a parenting standpoint, not from a child with autism standpoint. Sometimes when those questions are asked, we have to see them as opportunities to educate and not to go into defense mode.
Yes.
I think that's really important of like, okay, this is my opportunity, this is my platform to help them educate and understand, not that they're coming across accusatory. It may sound that way, but if I take in my head, if I switch it to this is my opportunity to educate them, then I'm going to try to stay a little bit more calm and I'm going to start to advocate for my kid in this way. I think that's something from a parenting standpoint, just in general, is really important.
I wish you'd have told me that about 10 years ago. Life might have been a little easier.
Well, when you work with behavior, you've been in the field of behavior for as long as I have, it's like, it takes a lot to ruffle my feathers. It really does. Missing a catch on a Sunday night or Saturday night football playoff games, that doesn't ruffle my feathers anymore. But I think, again, opportunities to help those family members understand your child's strength. I've met so many amazing kids that have just skill sets that are just beyond belief, that sharing those, give those nuggets, those cool, really amazing skills to family members so they know. And so when grandma and grandpa are sitting around the table, they get to brag about that to their friends. I think that's really important. And then just always encourage the question asking, when they're asking questions, say, hey, this is why, and help them understand. And that will help them build a relationship with it's okay to ask questions and wonder. Cause I'd much rather you ask me here in front of all of us and I give everybody the answer, but then you guys get in the car and you drive home after dinner and then you're just, that's not healthy for any relationship. So let's just put it out on the table. I mean, I'm a pretty direct person. So
That's a
let's
great
just put
point.
it all out here on the table,
Yes. Yes.
and maybe just set up a time where the kid, like, I know there other people have kids and things like that, but maybe set up a time where it's just like, hey, can we all get together as the adults, as siblings and grandparents, and just ask questions? I had the opportunity to go support a family with a child. The mom called and said, hey, would you mind meeting with my child, my parents and my husband's parents and our siblings and just kind of talk a little bit about autism and what our child's strengths are, how they can interact with them? I was like, yes, all day, every day. That is, I mean, to build advocacy and to help others understand. And that was such a huge thing for that family. It really helped kind of bring them together and just was a perspective shift for everybody. So that was something, again, I'm happy to help do and do online trainings for families as well, just to help understand. I do have some really cool simulations I do that
Okay.
help kind of put perspective on different how the brain works and how things are processed. And I've done it with teachers. I've done it in different supporting settings with individuals working with kids with different disabilities. And I've always just gotten really positive feedback about how eye-opening it was and how I didn't really understand like that processing delay and how that impactful that was and how, they're like, I felt anxious and it was just for an activity. It wasn't for real life or it wasn't for a grade or something like that. I think that's something that can be very beneficial as well.
Wow. Well, and let's remind people we've got some resources on your website, correct? That if this is something you want to go a little bit deeper on, you can go to Megan's website and get some information there.
Absolutely.
And you found an article, I think, on the Autism Speaks website specifically for helping family members.
I did. Autism Speaks actually has a grandparents guide out on their website, and I'll link it down in our show notes so people can, get it from there. But it's a very helpful guide that really talks about the core deficits of autism, what that looks like, how grandparents can interact, maybe some emotions and feelings that they're processing through their grandchild's diagnosis. And I also found a resource guide on how to talk about autism with your extended family members. And so we'll put that in the show notes as well. I think those are two really great resources and they're short. They're just a few pages. So it's not like they have to flip through 100 pages to try to figure it out. It's very quick, easy read, and it's a really great resource for families. And, sometimes just sending that to family members. Hey, I know you've kind of wondered about, I'm going to say Colby. You've kind of wondered about Colby. I read this. I thought it might be helpful. Feel free to check it out. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk through that with you or what that looks like for Colby, from a parent standpoint. So
That's great. I love it.
yeah.
I wish it was around about 10 years ago. That would have been very helpful.
But Scott, you wouldn't be on the journey and have the experiences and the wisdom that you do now.
I wouldn't have the scars to show for it either.
But I think that these resources will be really helpful. I'm glad that we can kind of talk about this. I feel like it's a topic that I see come up a lot in parenting groups and autism support groups that it's not really talked about. Parents feel very frustrated and don't really know how to approach it. So I'm hopeful that this podcast will help kind of build that relationship, give those parents some tools in their toolbox to kind of address this really hard issue. If you guys have any questions or any additional resources you're seeking, please check out my website at haupertconsultingllc. I also have some really awesome downloads on there. I've got a First Steps Autism checklist that you can download. I've also got top 10 questions for an ABA provider. So if you're maybe looking for ABA services for your child and you're like, what do I even ask? Download those questions. They're excellent. And I give you the answers that you should get when you ask those questions too. If you're looking for a good quality provider.
Okay.
And I actually will be uploading within the next couple days a medical binder. We've always talked about putting all that information in a binder, Scott. I've created a binder that families can download to help sort and organize all of those documents for them and their child. So all they got to do is download it, print it off, and stick it in. Actually, hold on. I have an example I'll show you.
Please.
It's got Megan's therapy records, and we've got just provider information. So any information you need for any speech OT, PT doctors, you can always put them on here. And this will be electronic copy too, so they can type in and save that information. Medication binder or medication log if your child's on medication to track. And then we've got our table of contents with all your insurance information, diagnosis report, all of that you can sort through and add. So then when you do have a child that's going, maybe for different therapies or doctor's appointment, you just grab the binder, take it with you, and that provider will have all the information they need, and you're not having to sort through different things and find it and forward it and all of that good stuff. So
You know what? If somebody doesn't go to your website just to download that right now, they're foolish, man. That's awesome. They should do that. I mean, that's, just to be a little bit organized. That's amazing. It lets you be on top of what's going on. So please, everybody, take a look at Megan's website. It's great.
Well, Scott, I know you guys are getting ready to do a group with the Hills. Have you got that finalized? Or
Yeah, by the time this goes out, it will probably have already started. We're going to
Okay.
start this Tuesday. But I would also like to say, if it's something that you would be interested, we're going to be teaching a class called Prepare and Enrich Your Marriage. And it's an 8-week program that takes on different topics. There's a personality profile that's involved in it, just to help you look at ways that you can improve your marriage. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing it with a class of just special needs parents, and we're going to be giving special needs childcare during this class. So we're probably going to have started the first class, but if it's something that you would be interested in, please contact us, because we'll put your name on a list. And, as soon as we get another round of people that express interest in it, I'll be happy to start another class. But I'm really looking forward to teaching this class and to help, because you and I have talked about how important it is that we keep our family strong, and especially that husband and wife relationship. It can really be trying, and we want to keep that relationship strong, because that's what's in the best interest of all of our children.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'm excited to hear how that goes for the families you'll be working with, Scott.
Yeah. Also, just as a reminder, the Hills Church has 3 different campuses in Tarrant County. We have a special needs ministry at each one of those campuses. So if you're looking for a church home, we'd love if you would join us. If you need to make contact with one of our ministers ahead of time, so that we can kind of walk you through what that looks like, so that we can make sure that we're prepared to provide the proper care for your child, please do so. We're also have a respite night once a month, and it's going to be at all 3 campuses. So if you need some time just to go back to being a husband and wife for about 3 hours on a Saturday night, please feel free to sign up for that. There is limited space on that, but we'd like to provide that for you. If you're looking for a home, or you've got spiritual questions, one of the things we've also talked about, Megan, is if you have questions, if you just are searching for some answers, need a little bit of help, please feel free to email us at autismfaithfamily@gmail.com. I'd be happy to reach out, just talk with you in any way that I can, pray for you, see what we can do to help you spiritually in your walk.
Absolutely. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please share it so others can enjoy and feel blessed by it as well. Scott and I love to talk, and we'll talk about all things autism, faith, and family. And so we want to be able to share that encouragement with others. You can also, if you don't want to look at our ugly mugs, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're on those platforms as well. Listen to us when you're on the treadmill or driving in the car in the mornings. We'd love to hear from you guys and your feedback. So follow us on all of our social media platforms as well, at Autism Faith Family.
Great.
So
Everybody, thanks for being with us tonight. It's been a pleasure. Hope you got something from this. If you did, let us know. We'd love to hear that. If you didn't, let us know that as well.
we're open to all feedback.
We're open to all feedback. All right.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Join us next time.